You know his name. Everyone had one. That kid whose basement had the massive TV, the sectional couch that smelled like Febreze and pizza rolls. And sitting there, hooked up with component cables, a PlayStation 2. You can picture his house right now. The specific route you took to get there. The way your stomach felt when your mom finally said yes, you could go over. Because here's what nobody talks about. That kid wasn't just your friend. He was a gatekeeper. And somewhere around 2002, he had more social power than anyone else in your grade. What you were experiencing wasn't just friendship. It was something psychologists call resource-based hierarchy, and understanding why that single piece of hardware reorganized your entire social world might explain more about human nature than you were ready for. Let's set the stage. The PlayStation 2 launched in October 2000 for $299. That's about $530 in today's money. For most families, that wasn't an impulse buy, that was a Christmas or birthday-only situation. And early on, they were impossible to find. Your parents couldn't just walk into Target and grab one. This wasn't abundance. This was scarcity. And kids are remarkably attuned to scarcity. See, there's this concept in social psychology called social capital, the idea that relationships have currency, that access to resources creates power. Adults experience this at country clubs and professional networks through connections. But kids? Kids experience it through whoever has the new game console. Think about how it worked. You'd hear about it at lunch. Jake got a PS2. Suddenly, Jake, who maybe wasn't the coolest kid last month, had something everyone wanted access to. Birthday party invitations meant something different now. Being chosen for his team at recess felt like diplomacy. You'd casually mention you were going to his house this weekend, and you'd watch other kids' faces change. You were accessing the resource. You had proximity to power. But here's where it gets psychologically interesting. You weren't just going over there to play games. You were going over there to exist in a space where you felt chosen. Because the most important thing about that friend's house wasn't the PlayStation 2. It was that he chose to share it with you. Every time you got that invitation, you want to come over Saturday? Your brain was processing multiple layers of social validation. He likes you enough to share his most valuable possession. You're in the inner circle. You matter. And for a kid navigating the brutal social mathematics of middle school, that hit different than any game ever could. Researchers who study childhood friendships have found something fascinating. Kids do and remember what they did together as much as they remember how they felt around each other. You probably can't recall the specific games you played at his house, but you remember the feeling of being there, the permission to exist in his space, the temporary escape from your own house, your own room, your own limitations. That wasn't about Grand Theft Auto or Kingdom Hearts. That was about belonging. And here's the uncomfortable part we don't talk about. Those friendships were transactional. Not always. Not entirely. But partly? Yeah, let's be honest. You were nicer to that kid than you might have been otherwise. You laughed at jokes that weren't that funny. You tolerated behaviors you wouldn't have from someone else. When you wanted to play as player one for the third hour straight, you didn't argue, because you'd done the math. The cost of mild annoyance was worth the reward of access. Some of you are bristling right now. My friendship was real. And I believe you. But would you have hung out with him as much if you didn't have the PS2? Would he have invited you over as much if you hadn't been so consistently available? These aren't accusations, they're just the mechanics of how scarcity shapes behavior. Economists call this strategic friendship formation. Kids don't use that language, obviously. But they understand the game. They always have. Throughout human history, proximity to resources has shaped social structures. It happened in tribal societies around fire and food. It happened in your middle school around a game console. We like to think childhood friendships are pure. And many are. But the PlayStation 2 era revealed something we'd rather not admit. Even as kids, we were learning to navigate hierarchies. We were learning who had value and why. We were learning that access could be granted and revoked. You remember what happened when a different kid got a PS2. Suddenly there was competition. Suddenly the power was diluted. Or worse, you remember when you finally got one. The script flipped. Now you were the gatekeeper. Now you felt the weight of choice. Who do you invite? How do you manage the politics? How do you keep your status without seeming like you're wielding it? It was exhausting, because power always is. So what do we do with this? Should you feel bad about those friendships? Should you look back and think, I was just using him? No, because here's the thing about childhood. You were learning. You were figuring out how the world worked. And the world, whether we like it or not, involves resources and access and negotiation. Every friendship involves some element of exchange: support, laughter, validation, time. That's not cynical. That's just human. The PS2 kid taught you something valuable. Having something people want gives you power. But it also comes with responsibility. Did he use that power generously? Did he make people feel welcome, or did he make them perform for access? Did he build genuine connections, or did he just collect admirers? And what about you? When you eventually had resources others wanted, whether it was a game console, or later a car, or connections, or skills, how did you use that leverage? Those afternoons in his basement weren't just about playing games. They were boot camp for understanding social dynamics, reciprocity, generosity, and the complicated dance between having something people want and being someone people want to be around. The truth is, you probably don't talk to that kid anymore. Maybe you drifted apart in high school. Maybe you moved. Maybe the friendship, once the console stopped mattering, revealed it was built on a foundation that couldn't support much weight. Or maybe, and this is the better story, maybe you actually became real friends. Maybe the PS2 was just the excuse that brought you together, and you discovered you actually liked each other. Maybe that transactional beginning evolved into something genuine. Both outcomes teach you something. The first teaches you that proximity isn't intimacy. The second teaches you that sometimes resources open doors, but people choose to walk through them. So the next time nostalgia hits you with a memory of that basement, that couch, that specific friend's house, ask yourself what you're really remembering. Are you missing the games? Or are you missing what it felt like to be chosen? To be part of something? To have access to a world bigger than your own? That kid with the PlayStation 2 didn't own your childhood because of the hardware. He owned it because he had something you needed, a space to exist outside of yourself. And for a few hours every weekend, in a basement that smelled like teenage boy and possibility, you felt like you mattered. That feeling? That's what you're nostalgic for. Not the games. The person who made you feel like you belonged.